There is a sound that haunted the nightmares of Allied soldiers throughout World War II. Not the whistle of artillery shells, nor the thunder of tank engines, but something far more personal, far more immediate. A mechanical roar so rapid, so relentless, that it seemed to tear the very air apart. To the Germans, it was the Hitlersäge, Hitler's buzzsaw. To everyone else, it was simply the sound of death. This was the MG-42, and on the frozen battlefields of the Eastern Front, it became the most feared weapon of the entire war. The Eastern Front was hell on earth. From the gates of Moscow to the ruins of Stalingrad, from the vast Ukrainian steppes to the shattered streets of Berlin, over 30 million soldiers and civilians would perish in the titanic struggle between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. In this apocalyptic landscape, where entire armies were swallowed by the vastness of the terrain and the brutality of combat, one weapon stood above all others in its ability to dominate the battlefield. The MG-42 didn't just kill, it shaped tactics, changed doctrine, and left an imprint on military thinking that persists to this very day. To understand the MG-42, we must first understand the problem it was designed to solve. When Germany invaded Poland in September 1939, its infantry squads were already equipped with what many considered the finest machine gun in the world, the MG-34. This weapon was a marvel of precision engineering, capable of firing up to 900 rounds per minute with remarkable accuracy. It could be mounted on a bipod for squad support or a tripod for sustained fire. It was reliable, versatile, and deadly, but it had a fatal flaw. It was too good. The MG-34 was a peacetime weapon thrust into total war. Every component was machined to exacting tolerances, requiring skilled craftsmen and expensive machine tools to produce. Each gun took dozens of hours to manufacture, and as the Wehrmacht expanded at a breakneck pace, German industry simply could not keep up with demand. More critically, the MG-34's precision engineering made it vulnerable to the harsh realities of combat on the Eastern Front. Mud, sand, ice, and the corrosive effects of sustained firing could jam its intricate mechanisms. When temperatures plummeted to 40 degrees below zero during the winter of 1941, many MG-34s simply stopped working. German soldiers needed something simpler, tougher, and far easier to mass-produce. The solution came from a team of engineers at Grossfuss AG, a metalworking company in the industrial city of Dubeln. Led by Dr. Werner Gruner, the design team approached the problem with revolutionary thinking. Rather than machining parts from solid blocks of steel, they would use stamped metal sheets and simple welds. Instead of complex machining, they would employ basic manufacturing techniques that could be performed by semi-skilled workers in factories across Germany. The goal was audacious: create a machine gun that was cheaper and faster to produce than the MG-34, yet more reliable and even more lethal. The result was the Maschinengewehr 42, officially adopted by the Wehrmacht in 1942. What the engineers created was nothing short of a paradigm shift in weapons design. The MG-42 took only 75 man-hours to produce compared to the MG-34's 150. It used stamped steel components held together by welds and pins, eschewing the expensive machined parts of its predecessor. Yet somehow, through brilliant engineering, it was actually superior to the weapon it replaced. At the heart of the MG-42's effectiveness was its operating system. The weapon used a roller-locked bolt mechanism that was both simple and ingenious. When the gun fired, the bolt remained locked in place by two rollers pressed outward into recesses in the receiver. As the barrel recoiled backward, a cam surface forced the rollers inward, unlocking the bolt and allowing it to cycle. This system was remarkably robust, continuing to function even when caked with dirt or frozen by extreme cold. More importantly, it was fast, extraordinarily fast. The MG42 achieved a cyclic rate of fire between 1,200 and 1,500 rounds per minute. To put that in perspective, most machine guns of the era fired between 400 and 600 rounds per minute. The American Browning M 1919 topped out at around 500. The Soviet Degtyaryov managed 600. The MG42 fired more than twice as fast as its contemporaries. This wasn't just a quantitative difference, it fundamentally changed how the weapon performed in combat. At such a high rate of fire, individual shots blurred together into a continuous roar. Where other machine guns produced a distinctive rat-tat-tat sound, the MG42 emitted a tearing, ripping noise that soldiers compared to cloth being violently torn apart. This earned it a collection of grim nicknames: Hitler's Buzzsaw, the Bone Saw, the Ripper, the Zipper. Allied soldiers reported that the sound alone was psychologically devastating, announcing with terrible certainty that they were in the killing zone of the deadliest machine gun ever created. But high rate of fire created its own problems. The MG42 could empty a 250-round belt in just 10 seconds of sustained fire. The barrel would become so hot that it could glow red and warp, rendering the weapon useless. The German engineers solved this with another brilliant innovation: a quick-change barrel system. The barrel was held in place by a simple latch that could be released in seconds. A trained gunner wearing an asbestos glove could swap a hot barrel for a cool one in under 5 seconds, barely interrupting the weapon's devastating fire. Each MG42 crew carried multiple spare barrels, allowing them to maintain suppressive fire indefinitely as long as ammunition held out. On the Eastern Front, the MG42 became the centerpiece of German infantry tactics. Wehrmacht doctrine organized infantry squads around the machine gun, not the rifleman. A typical German squad consisted of 10 men, but the MG42 and its 3-man crew were the focus of all operations. The squad leader positioned his men to support the machine gun. Riflemen carried extra ammunition for it. Every tactical decision revolved around getting the MG42 into the optimal firing position. This approach proved devastatingly effective against Soviet infantry tactics. Red Army doctrine in the early war years emphasized mass infantry assaults, waves of soldiers advancing across open ground toward German positions. Against the MG42, these tactics became suicidal. A single gun could sweep an entire field of fire, cutting down dozens of men in seconds. The high rate of fire meant that even soldiers diving for cover were likely to be hit before reaching the ground. German gunners learned to fire in short bursts, sweeping the barrel across their target area in a technique called the beaten zone. Within this zone, survival was a matter of pure chance. The psychological impact of the MG42 cannot be overstated. Veterans from every Allied army spoke of the terror it inspired. Soviet soldiers called it the linoleum ripper for its distinctive sound. American troops advancing through France and Germany reported that the sound of an MG42 opening fire would cause entire units to freeze or scatter. The weapon's rate of fire made it sound like there were multiple guns firing when there might be only one. This created a force multiplier effect, making German positions seem far more heavily defended than they actually were. Allied forces developed specific tactics to counter the MG42. Infantry were trained to identify its position by sound and muzzle flash, then to call in mortar or artillery fire rather than attempting a direct assault. Snipers targeted MG42 crews relentlessly, knowing that killing a trained gunner was often more valuable than targeting officers. Tank commanders learned to focus their machine guns and main armament on suspected MG42 positions before infantry advanced. Yet despite these countermeasures, the weapon remained a dominant force throughout the war. The industrial achievement behind the MG42 was as impressive as its battlefield performance. Despite devastating Allied bombing campaigns that crippled German industry, factories produced over 400,000 MG42s between 1942 and 1943-1945. Production was dispersed across multiple facilities, including underground factories and converted civilian workshops. The weapon's design allowed for rapid training of new workers and quick retooling of production lines. Even as the Third Reich collapsed in the war's final months, MG42s continued to roll off assembly lines. This mass production capability meant that by 1943, nearly every German infantry squad on the Eastern Front was equipped with an MG42. The weapon became ubiquitous, encountered in every type of terrain and combat situation. It defended the static positions of the Atlantic Wall and the fortified lines around Kursk. It provided covering fire during desperate retreats across Russia. It was mounted on vehicles, aircraft, and fortifications. Its versatility was matched only by its reliability. Captured MG42s were prized by Allied soldiers, who would often use them in preference to their own weapons when ammunition could be secured. The strategic importance of the MG42 extended beyond its immediate tactical effectiveness. It fundamentally changed how armies thought about infantry organization and firepower. The German model of building squads around a powerful machine gun influenced military doctrine worldwide. After the war, armies that had fought against the MG42 began reorganizing their own infantry units along similar lines, recognizing that concentrated, reliable automatic fire was the key to dominating the battlefield. When Germany fell in May 1945, the MG42's story didn't end. It was only beginning its next chapter. The weapon's design was so sound that it continued in production and service for decades after the war. In the 1950s, West Germany rearmed and adopted a modified version of the MG42 as the MG1, later improved as the MG3. This updated version, chambered in NATO standard 7.62mm ammunition, remains in service with several armies today, more than 80 years after the original design was conceived. The MG42's influence spread far beyond German borders. American weapons designers studying captured examples were impressed by the roller-locked bolt system and the quick-change barrel. These features influenced the development of the M60 machine gun, which became the U.S. military's primary general-purpose machine gun for decades. The Soviet Union, despite having suffered under the MG42's fire, incorporated lessons from its design into their own post-war machine gun development. Modern weapons designers still reference the MG42 when developing new machine guns. Its combination of high rate of fire, reliability, and ease of manufacture set a standard that has rarely been matched and never truly surpassed. Military museums around the world display MG42s as examples of peak weapon design. A gun that achieved its purpose so perfectly that its fundamental architecture remains relevant nearly a century after its creation. Yet we cannot discuss the MG42's legacy without acknowledging the darkness it represents. This was a weapon designed for conquest and genocide, created by a regime that murdered millions in pursuit of twisted ideology. The MG42 defended concentration camps and killing sites. It cut down civilians and soldiers alike in humanity's most destructive conflict. Its efficiency in taking human life is inseparable from the evil purposes it served. The survivors who heard that distinctive tearing sound carry it with them still. In interviews decades after the war, veterans from every nation speak of it. How it made their blood run cold, how it signaled death approaching at 1,500 rounds per minute. how it symbolized the industrial-scale slaughter that defined the Second World War. The MG-42 was efficient, reliable, and brilliantly engineered, but it was engineered for killing, and it performed that function with terrible effectiveness. Today, when military historians and firearms experts discuss the greatest weapons of World War II, the MG-42 inevitably appears near the top of every list, not because it was wielded by the victors, but because by purely technical measures, it may have been the finest machine gun of the entire war. It set new standards for firepower, reliability, and tactical effectiveness. It influenced military doctrine and weapons design for generations, and it left an indelible mark on the memory of everyone who faced it in combat. The MG-42 represents a paradox at the heart of military technology. It was a triumph of engineering that served monstrous purposes. It was a weapon so effective that its design principles persist to this day, even as we recoil from the regime that created it. It reminds us that technical excellence is morally neutral, that genius can be placed in service of any cause, noble or horrific. On the Eastern Front, in the desperate fighting that decided the fate of the modern world, the MG-42 earned its fearsome reputation, one burst of fire at a time. It was Hitler's buzzsaw, the bone saw, the sound of death. And that sound, that terrible tearing roar, echoes still in the history of warfare and the memory of those who survived it. If you enjoyed this look into one of history's most feared weapons, make sure to subscribe for more stories about iconic firearms. Tell us in the comments what weapon you'd like to see next. Your suggestion might inspire our next episode.